Life in America before the Internet. There was a time, not so long ago, when silence filled the spaces between thoughts, when questions hung in the air for hours, sometimes days, waiting for answers that might never come, when you could wonder about something, truly wonder, and carry that wondering with you like a stone in your pocket, smooth and heavy with possibility. The world moved differently then, slower, but not in the way you might think. It wasn't that people were slower, or that time itself dragged its feet. It's that information had weight. It had to travel. It had to wait. Imagine waking up on a Saturday morning in 1983, and you want to know something. Maybe you heard a song on the radio, and you can't remember who sang it. Maybe you're arguing with your brother about which year a movie came out. Maybe you just want to know how tall Mount Everest is. These small curiosities, these tiny gaps in knowledge that we fill now in seconds, they simply existed. They lived with you. You carried them around, and they became part of your day. Little mysteries woven into the fabric of ordinary life. If the question mattered enough, you'd call someone. You'd walk to the phone on the wall in the kitchen, the one with the long coiled cord that stretched just far enough to let you pace 3 steps in either direction. You'd dial, and the rotary wheel would click back into place after each number. A small meditation in mechanical patience. 7 numbers for a local call. 10 if it was long distance, which cost money. Real money that showed up on a bill at the end of the month. And when you called, you had no idea if anyone would answer. You just had to hope they were home. If they weren't, you'd try again later, or tomorrow, or you'd forget entirely, and the question would dissolve, unanswered, into the past. But if your question was bigger, if it required real knowledge, you'd have to go somewhere. You'd have to leave your house and enter a building that existed solely to hold answers. The library was a cathedral of information, quiet and cool and smelling of old paper and floor polish. Inside, every answer that had ever been written down lived in those stacks. But finding it required strategy, required understanding a system that now seems almost mystical in its complexity. The card catalog was a wooden cabinet with hundreds of small drawers, each one filled with typed index cards, yellowed and soft at the edges. You'd flip through them, your fingers walking through the alphabet, searching for a subject or an author or a title. Each card pointed you toward a place, a call number that corresponded to a location somewhere in the building. You'd write it down on a slip of paper, and then you'd go hunting. Walking between the tall shelves, reading the spines, searching for the numbers that matched. Sometimes you'd find it. Sometimes you wouldn't. Sometimes the book would be missing, checked out by someone else weeks ago, living in their house, holding their place with a dog-eared page. And if you needed something current, something from the news, you'd have to thread a spool of microfilm into a machine and scroll through, page by ghostly page, searching manually through editions of newspapers, your eyes straining in the dim light. There was no search function. There was only looking. Children did their homework this way. They opened encyclopedias, those heavy volumes that sat in a row on a shelf, each one covering a different section of human knowledge. A through CD through F. The pages were thin and delicate, printed with tiny text and occasional illustrations. If you needed to write a report on dolphins or the Dust Bowl or ancient Egypt, you'd copy information by hand, transcribing facts onto notebook paper in blue ink. Sometimes you'd go to 3 libraries to find enough information for a 5-page report. Sometimes you would use whatever you could find and hope it was enough. When you didn't know something, you accepted it. You lived in the question. Someone might say they heard that sharks never sleep, or that there's a town in Alaska where it's dark for 6 months, and you'd just have to decide whether you believed them. You couldn't check. You couldn't verify. You'd carry that claim with you, turning it over in your mind, wondering if it was true, and maybe years later you'd come across the answer by accident, in a magazine at a dentist's office or in a conversation with someone who seemed to know. Waiting was built into everything. You'd write a letter by hand, fold it into an envelope, put a stamp in the corner, and leave it in a mailbox. Then you'd wait. Days would pass. A week. 2 weeks. Eventually, if you were lucky, a response would arrive. You'd see it there in the pile of mail, recognize the handwriting, and the waiting would finally end. The words inside were chosen carefully because they had to be. Because once you sealed the envelope, you couldn't take them back. You couldn't edit or delete. What you wrote was what they'd receive days later, when you'd already moved on to other thoughts. People called ahead before they drove to see you. They had to, because once someone left their house, they disappeared. They became unreachable, absorbed into the space between one place and another. If they were late, you'd simply wait, looking out the window, checking the clock, wondering if they'd gotten lost or changed their mind or forgotten entirely. There was no way to know. You just waited, or gave up, or both. Television was an event. You watched what was on when it was on, or you missed it. The TV guide sat on the coffee table, a slim magazine with a week's worth of schedules printed in tiny grids. You'd flip through it in the afternoon, planning your evening around what shows were airing. 8 o'clock. 9 o'clock. If you missed an episode of your favorite show, it was gone. It would air again in the summer, maybe, during reruns, or it would just vanish into memory, a gap in the story you'd never fill. People gathered around televisions to watch things together because that was the only way. Everyone saw the same news at the same time. Everyone watched the same shows. Shared culture was truly shared because there was no other option. Boredom was different then. It was deeper. It stretched out in long, empty hours, especially in summer, especially if you were young. You'd lie on your back in the grass and watch clouds drift across the sky, shapes that looked like animals or faces or nothing at all. You'd ride your bike in circles around the block until your legs ached. You'd sit on the front steps and wait for something to happen, for someone to walk by or for an idea to arrive. Boredom was a space you had to fill yourself, with your body or your imagination or the few objects within reach. A stick became a sword. A cardboard box became a spaceship. The woods behind the house became an unexplored world. You had to make your own entertainment because there was nothing else. No endless scroll of videos. No infinite feed of novelty. Just you and time and whatever you could think of to do with it. If you wanted to know what was happening in the world, you waited for the newspaper to arrive in the morning. It would land on the driveway with a soft thud, rolled and rubber-banded, slightly damp with dew. You'd unfold it at the kitchen table, and the paper would leave black smudges on your fingers. The news was already hours old by the time you read it, already history. But it didn't matter because everyone else was reading the same words at the same time, holding the same ink-stained pages. The world felt smaller then, in some ways, because we all looked through the same few windows. Music lived in physical objects, records and tapes and eventually compact discs, each one holding a finite number of songs. You'd save your money to buy an album, and then you'd listen to it over and over because it was the only new music you had. You'd memorize every song, even the ones you didn't like at first, because they were there, and you'd learn to love them simply through repetition. You'd make mixtapes for people you cared about, recording songs one by one off the radio, waiting for your favorite to play, pressing record and pause at just the right moment. It took hours. It meant something. The past felt more distant because it was harder to access. Old photographs sat in shoeboxes or albums, and you'd only see them when someone pulled them out, usually at holidays or when relatives visited. There was no camera in your pocket. Taking a picture required planning, required loading film, required finishing the entire roll before you could take it somewhere to be developed. You'd drop off the film canister and come back a week later to pick up the prints, and half the pictures would be blurry, or poorly lit, or cut off someone's head, but you'd keep them anyway. You had no way to see what you'd captured until it was too late to capture it again. Phone calls were blind. When the phone rang, you had no idea who it was. It could be anyone. A friend, a telemarketer, your grandmother. A wrong number. You'd pick up the receiver and say hello, and wait to find out. If you needed to reach someone specific, you'd look up their number in the phone book, a thick volume delivered to your door once a year, filled with the names and addresses and phone numbers of everyone in town. Everyone's information was just there, printed and public, because privacy meant something different. Or maybe privacy didn't exist in quite the same way. People knew where you lived. They could find you if they wanted to. But mostly, they left you alone. And when you were out in the world, you were truly out. Unreachable. Free. In a way that's hard to explain now. You'd leave the house, and no one could get a hold of you until you came back. You'd get lost and have to stop and ask someone for directions, unfolding a paper map on the hood of your car, trying to trace your route with your finger. You'd arrive at a movie theater and buy a ticket for whatever was playing at that moment, taking a chance on something you knew nothing about. You'd sit in a restaurant and wait for your food and have nothing to do but look around, watch other people, sit with your own thoughts. There was a loneliness to it sometimes, a sense of being cut off, of not knowing, of feeling the vast spaces between people. But there was also a closeness, because when you were with someone, you were really with them. There was nothing else pulling at your attention. No buzzing in your pocket, no screens glowing between you. Just the two of you, talking or not talking, sharing the same moment in time. People remembered things differently. They had to, because there was no way to look them up later. You'd commit phone numbers to memory, dozens of them. Your own, your parents', your best friends', the pizza place, the video store. They lived in your brain because there was nowhere else to keep them. You'd remember how to get places, the routes becoming automatic, your body learning the turns. You'd remember facts and stories and lyrics because once you forgot them, they might be gone forever. And then something changed. Slowly at first, then all at once. Computers in every home. Modems that screamed and hissed, email addresses, websites, search engines. The world folded in on itself, distances collapsing, information rushing in like water through a broken dam. Every question suddenly had an answer, instant and complete. Every person became reachable. Every moment became documented. The silence filled with noise. We gained something enormous. The sum of human knowledge at our fingertips. Connection across impossible distances. Efficiency and convenience and endless entertainment. But we lost something too. That weight of not knowing. That patience. That boredom that forced us to be creative. That presence that came from having nowhere else to be, nothing else to do, no other world to disappear into. The world before the internet wasn't better exactly. It was just different, quieter, slower, more still. A world where questions could go unanswered, and that was okay. where you could be alone with your thoughts for hours and not feel the pull of elsewhere, where waiting was just part of life, woven into the fabric of every day, as natural as breathing. It's gone now, that world, or mostly gone, living on only in memory and old photographs and stories we tell. But sometimes, in certain moments, when the Wi-Fi cuts out, or the power goes down, or you deliberately put your phone in another room, you can almost feel it again. That old silence. That weight of time. That sense of being exactly where you are, with no idea what's happening anywhere else, and that being perfectly, completely enough.